My name's Sarah, I'm 52, and I've been a single mother to my son Jake, who's 25 now. His father, my husband, passed away before Jake was even born. An aneurysm took him in his sleep, and by the time I woke up, he was already gone. It was just me and Jake from that point on, and raising him by myself wasn't easy, but I did everything I could. I never regretted a moment of it. But what's happening now makes me wonder if I somehow went wrong along the way. Let me get straight to the point. My son doesn't want me to attend his wedding. And the reason? Apparently, I don't fit in with his fiancée's family and the kind of people who'll be at the wedding. According to Jake, his fiancée Zoe and her family think I don't look wealthy enough or sophisticated enough to blend in with their friends. Can you imagine hearing that from your own child? I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I need to give you some background to make sense of how we got here. Jake met Zoe 2 years ago through mutual friends. She comes from a wealthy family. Her parents own a major real estate firm, and they live in a world I've never been a part of. Zoe looks every bit the part too, always dressed in designer clothes, driving expensive cars. In comparison, I'm a college economist professor. I make a decent living, but I've lived within my means. My life hasn't been glamorous, but it's been comfortable, and I've been proud of how I've raised my son without needing to rely on anyone. When Jake first introduced me to Zoe, I didn't think much of her wealth or status. I was just happy that my son was happy. But soon things started to shift. After that first meeting, Jake called me, telling me I needed to make changes to my house, update the furniture, replace old things, just so that it didn't embarrass him. Apparently, after seeing Zoe's family mansion, he felt like my home, with its older, more personal touches, wasn't good enough anymore. I was stunned. The furniture he wanted me to replace? Some of it had been chosen by my late husband. It wasn't just furniture to me, it held memories. But that didn't seem to matter to Jake. We had a huge argument about it. I told him if he was embarrassed by me, maybe he shouldn't have introduced me to Zoe at all. He apologized later, but after that, something changed between us. He stopped bringing Zoe over, and I only saw her a handful of times. Things got worse after they got engaged. I attended their engagement party, but even then, Jake had a lot to say about how I looked. He told me I should have put more effort into my appearance and worn something nicer, something more appropriate for the occasion. The problem, of course, wasn't my clothes. It was the fact that I wasn't wearing luxury brands like everyone else. But I'm not made of money, and I didn't think that was something to be ashamed of. I still tried to keep in touch with Jake, though I could feel him pulling away. Then, 3 days ago, Jake came over to visit and dropped the bombshell. Zoe's parents didn't think I should attend the wedding. Their reason? I didn't fit the image they wanted for their high society friends and business associates. They didn't want me to embarrass myself or Jake by being there. And Jake agreed with them. He said that since her family was paying for most of the wedding, he needed to respect their wishes. He even promised that there would be a small private ceremony later where I'd be invited, but not the main event. I can't explain how much that hurt. I started crying, and Jake just got frustrated, telling me I was being selfish for not understanding his side. He said it wasn't worth crying over because it's just a fact that I didn't look rich enough to be there. I told him to leave my house and not come back. I didn't even want to argue anymore. I was done. But after he left, the pain didn't go away. I sat there feeling completely shattered. After all I'd done for him, how could he say those things? How could he choose to side with people who judged me based on my appearance and wealth? I couldn't believe it. Now here's where things get messy. A few weeks ago, Jake had told me that he and Zoe were struggling to secure the venue they wanted for their wedding. It was a beautiful, exclusive property outside the city, but the owner wasn't willing to rent it out for events. Jake had been trying to negotiate with him, but the man refused, even though Zoe's parents were willing to pay any amount. Zoe was stubborn and refused to even consider another location, so Jake was stuck trying to figure it out. When he told me the name of the venue owner, I realized that I actually knew him. We'd gone to college together, though we hadn't kept in touch much since then. I thought I could help, but I didn't tell Jake. I wanted it to be a surprise. I reached out to the owner and found out why he was hesitant. He and his wife had dealt with a few weddings where people trashed the property, and they didn't want to risk it again. After a few days of talking, I convinced him that Zoe's family could be trusted and that they wouldn't ruin the place. In the end, He agreed to let them have the venue. Jake was thrilled when they got the news. He didn't know I was the one who made it happen, and I thought I'd tell him after the wedding as a nice surprise. But then, after the way he treated me, I was furious. I couldn't let it go. I called the venue owner and told him everything, how Jake had treated me, how he didn't want me at the wedding because I didn't fit in. The owner was shocked. He and his wife were incredibly kind to me, and they decided to back out of the deal. They refunded the money Zoe's family had paid and informed them they could no longer host the wedding there. They were perfectly within their rights. The contract allowed them to cancel up to a week before the event. So now, with only 2 weeks to go, Jake and Zoe were left without a venue. I knew it was a petty move. I knew it was out of character for me, but I couldn't stop myself. I felt so hurt, so betrayed, and this was the only way I could think of to fight back. I wrote Jake a letter explaining everything and dropped it off at his house. Then I blocked his number. I was done with him. Later that night, Jake showed up at my house again, this time in tears. He apologized, saying he didn't realize I'd been the one to get the venue for him, and that he was sorry for how he'd treated me. But his apology felt hollow. He was only sorry because the wedding was falling apart, and now he needed my help again. He begged me to call the venue owner and fix things, but I refused. I told him that after everything he'd said and done, I didn't owe him anything. Jake got angry, accusing me of being unreasonable and selfish. He even said that if I didn't help him, I'd lose him forever. That's when I realized that this wasn't about the venue. It wasn't about Zoe or her family. It was about Jake, my son, and the fact that he was embarrassed of me. He had chosen to side with people who looked down on me because I didn't fit into their world. I told him to leave, and after more arguing, he finally did. Since then, I've been trying to figure out if I made the right choice. Was I wrong to refuse to help him? Am I being too harsh, or is this what he deserves? I just don't know anymore. It's been a week since that night. The weight of everything still hangs over me, and to be honest, I've been feeling conflicted. Part of me wonders if I went too far by calling off the venue. I mean, I'm his mother. I raised him. I shouldn't have to stoop to this level, right? But another part of me is still so hurt by everything he said, by how easily he brushed me aside just because I wasn't fancy enough for his fiancée's world. I spent a lot of time thinking about it, talking to friends and family. I needed to hear what they thought. I needed some outside perspective. When I told them what had happened, how my own son had essentially told me I wasn't good enough for his wedding, they were furious. Even family members who hadn't been invited to the wedding were outraged. Apparently, some of them had been wondering why they hadn't received invitations. And when I explained the real reason, it only made things worse. Jake had been trying to keep the rest of the family out too, probably for the same reasons he excluded me. He was embarrassed by us, by where he came from. Everyone I talked to seemed to think that calling off the venue was justified. Some even said I should have done worse, but I'm not that kind of person. I was already feeling guilty enough. It didn't help that Jake hasn't tried to contact me since that night. We didn't end things on good terms, and deep down, I think I was hoping he'd come back around and realize how much he'd hurt me. But so far, nothing. There are only a couple of days left until the wedding, or what would have been the wedding, and I have no idea what Jake and Zoe are going to do. They've already sent out the invitations with the now canceled venue printed on them, and there's no way they'll be able to find a new place in time. But honestly, it's not my problem anymore. I've spent too long being hurt, trying to figure out where I went wrong with Jake, but now I'm starting to realize that this isn't about me. This is about him. I've been raising him alone for 25 years, and I did my best. I gave him everything I could, and I thought I was raising a good, decent man, but it seems like the person he's become, someone who values appearances over relationships, someone who's ashamed of his own family, has been shaped by things beyond my control. I can't carry the weight of that anymore. I've done my part as a mother, and now I have to let go. It's a strange thing to accept, that your child doesn't want you in their life, or at least not in the way you've always been. But I've come to realize that I can't make him see the value of family if he's more concerned with fitting into a world of money and appearances. He has to come to that realization on his own, and if he doesn't, then maybe I'll never really have a place in his life again. But one thing's for sure, I'm done being disrespected. I've sacrificed too much to be treated like I don't matter, like I'm an afterthought. If Jake doesn't want me at his wedding, then fine. But that also means I don't have to keep bending over backward to help him. I won't fix this venue issue for him. I won't keep trying to make things right when he clearly doesn't care about making things right with me. That's why I've decided to stick to my decision. I'm not going to reach out to the venue owner to change their minds. I know my son is old enough to deal with the consequences of his actions, and I refuse to enable his behavior anymore. If he's going to learn anything from this, it has to come from him facing the reality of what he's done. Honestly, it still stings. I've spent the past couple of days processing everything, and the more I think about it, the clearer it becomes. This isn't just about the wedding, it's about respect. It's about being treated like I'm worth something, and right now, Jake doesn't see me that way. If he did, he never would have treated me like this in the first place. And as much as it hurts, I know I have to stand my ground. So no, I'm not going to fix this for him. He can deal with the fallout of losing the venue, and if that means the wedding has to be canceled or rescheduled, then so be it. I've spent too long cleaning up his messes, and I'm not going to do it anymore. He's an adult now, and it's time for him to face the consequences of his choices. It's hard to let go, but I think it's necessary. I've spoken to a few relatives, and they agree with me. They've seen how much I've done for Jake over the years, and they're just as shocked as I am by how he's treated me. They've told me that I've done enough, and it's time for me to focus on myself, on my own well-being. I'm trying to take that advice to heart, but it's not easy. Being a single mom for so long, my whole life has revolved around my son. Now that he's distanced himself from me, I feel like I'm losing a part of myself. But maybe that's the problem. I've spent so long defining myself by my role as his mother that I've forgotten who I am outside of that. I guess that's something I'll have to figure out now. There's still a small part of me that hopes Jake will come to his senses, that he'll realize how much he's hurt me and try to make things right. But I'm not holding my breath. For now, I'm focusing on what I can control, and that's my own life. I've got friends, I've got family, and I've got myself. And that's enough. I don't know what's going to happen with the wedding, and honestly, I'm not sure I care anymore. If Jake wants to throw away our relationship for the sake of appearances, that's his choice. But I'm done letting him make me feel small. I'm done being the afterthought. So 2 days before what would have been the wedding, I got a call from Zoe. To be honest, I was shocked. After everything that had happened, I wasn't expecting to hear from her at all. I figured she and Jake would be scrambling to fix the venue situation, maybe even looking for a last-minute backup. But there she was, calling me directly. Part of me didn't even want to pick up the phone, but something told me I should, so I answered. Her voice was different this time, calm, but I could tell she'd been crying. Zoe asked if we could talk, and even though I wasn't sure what to expect, I agreed. I wasn't rude, but I didn't exactly roll out the red carpet for her either. I just couldn't forget how Jake had said she and her parents were the ones who didn't want me at the wedding. It's hard to erase that kind of hurt. But what she said next threw me completely off balance. She started by saying she knew things between Jake and me had fallen apart, and she admitted that she had heard from him that I wasn't coming to the wedding. I expected her to continue with some excuse or explanation, but instead, she surprised me by saying she was disappointed that I wouldn't be attending. She told me she had always respected me, admired me even, and that she wished we could have had a better relationship. That was the first time she'd ever said anything like that to me, so I didn't know how to respond. It felt like she was trying to smooth things over, and I wasn't sure if I could trust it. So I decided to confront her. I told her flat out that Jake had said she and her parents didn't want me at the wedding, that they thought I wouldn't fit in with their wealthy friends and business associates. There was silence on the other end of the line for what felt like an eternity. And then Zoe finally spoke up. She sounded confused, shocked even. She told me that neither she nor her parents had ever said anything like that. In fact, she said, Jake had told her I didn't want to attend the wedding because I didn't approve of her or her family. He had apparently made it sound like I had refused to come because I thought they were snobs and didn't want to be part of their world. At that moment, it was like everything clicked into place. Jake had been lying to both of us, playing both sides to keep us apart. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own son had made me believe that his fiancée's family didn't want me at their wedding, while at the same time telling Zoe that I didn't want to be there. All this time, I had been angry at her and her family, thinking they were the ones who looked down on me, when it was Jake who had created this entire mess. I told Zoe we needed to talk more and that I needed some time to process everything. After hanging up, I sat there for what felt like hours, just replaying the entire situation in my head. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was my son actively lying to me and the woman he was supposed to be marrying. And for what? To avoid feeling embarrassed? To keep up appearances? I finally called Zoe back after I'd calmed down a bit. We talked for a long time, comparing stories and piecing together everything that had happened over the past few months. She told me about how distant Jake had been with her family too, and how he had painted this picture of me as someone who was judgmental and difficult. It all started to make sense. He had been embarrassed by both sides and had tried to control the situation by manipulating all of us. I was furious, but mostly I was heartbroken. I had spent the last 25 years raising Jake, thinking I had raised him to be a decent, honest man. And now I was faced with the reality that he had lied to me, to Zoe, to everyone. It was like everything I thought I knew about him was crumbling before my eyes. Zoe was devastated too. She told me that she couldn't believe Jake had done this to us, and she didn't know how to move forward from here. She kept apologizing to me, even though none of this was her fault. We had both been played by the same person, the person we had both trusted the most. By the time we ended the call, we were both emotionally drained. Zoe said she needed time to think about everything, and I told her I understood. I wasn't sure what she was going to do next, but honestly, I wouldn't have blamed her if she called off the wedding. How could you marry someone after finding out they'd been lying to you like that? As for me, I was left to deal with the aftermath. I knew Jake was going to figure out that Zoe and I had talked and that the truth was out. I didn't know what his reaction would be, but I wasn't ready to face him just yet. I needed time to process everything on my own. I couldn't help but feel this deep sense of betrayal. How could my own son do this to me? To Zoe? What kind of person had he become that he would rather lie and manipulate everyone around him just to save face? It broke my heart to think that the boy I had raised was capable of something like this. I spent the next few days in a daze, trying to make sense of it all. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus on anything else. I knew Zoe was probably going through the same thing, and part of me felt guilty for dragging her into this, even though it wasn't my fault. She deserved better than this. We both did. Then, as I had predicted, Jake showed up at my house again. This time, he looked even more desperate than before. His face was pale, and he had bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in days. He rang the doorbell over and over again, but I didn't answer. I couldn't. I didn't want to face him, not after everything I had learned. I spoke to him through the intercom, and he immediately started apologizing, saying he knew I had talked to Zoe and that everything was out in the open now. He told me that Zoe had kicked him out after their fight, and he didn't know where else to go. His voice cracked as he talked about how sorry he was, how he had let things spiral out of control and had gotten caught up in trying to fit into Zoe's world. He said he knew he had messed up, that he had been selfish and shallow, but he wanted a chance to make things right. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that he was genuinely sorry, but the truth is, I couldn't, not after everything he had done. I told him that I might be able to forgive him one day, but not now. Not when it was clear that he wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry because he had been caught. There's a big difference, and I needed him to understand that. He kept trying to convince me to let him stay, even offering to pay rent if it meant he could live with me again. But I stood firm. I told him that my house was no longer his home, not after what he had done. He had chosen to turn his back on me and on his family, and now he had to live with the consequences of that choice. Eventually he gave up. He snapped at me, saying I was just as heartless as he had imagined, and then he left. I watched him walk away carrying his bags, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had truly lost my son. I know he'll be fine. He has enough resources to figure things out on his own. But as for me, I'm not sure where I go from here. I've spent my whole life being his mother, and now that role feels like it's been ripped away from me. But maybe that's for the best. Maybe it's time for me to let go. It's been 2 weeks since Jake's wedding day came and went, and, as expected, there was no wedding. I knew it was over when I started getting messages from friends and family sending me a post that Zoe had put up on social media. She had announced that she and Jake had parted ways and asked everyone to respect her privacy during this difficult time. No other details were shared, but I knew exactly what had happened. The truth had come out, and Zoe had realized that Jake wasn't the man she thought he was. In a way, it felt like a relief, but it also left me with a deep sadness. Jake hasn't tried to contact me since that last time he showed up at my house. He hasn't called, texted, or even sent me an email. Part of me expected him to come back and try again to explain himself, but he hasn't. I guess he's accepted that things between us are broken, maybe beyond repair. And honestly, I've been trying to come to terms with that myself. I thought about everything I said to him that day when I told him to leave. I thought about the years I spent raising him, sacrificing for him, and doing everything I could to give him a good life. And for what? To be treated like I wasn't good enough, like I didn't belong in his new world. I keep replaying the moments when he told me I didn't fit in with Zoe's family, and I wonder how long he'd been feeling that way. Had he always been embarrassed by me, or was it only after he met her? I know I'll never get the answers to those questions, and that's something I'll have to live with. The pain of realizing that your own child doesn't want you in their life is something I wouldn't wish on anyone. It cuts deep in a way that no other hurt can. I've tried to distract myself by focusing on other things, my friends, my work, but it's always there, lingering in the background, that sense of loss. But at the same time, I know that I made the right decision. I had to stand up for myself, even if it meant losing Jake in the process. I couldn't let him continue to treat me like I was less than, like I didn't matter. I've given too much, and I deserve better than that. I deserve respect, and if he can't see that, then maybe it's better for both of us to go our separate ways. Zoe did the right thing too. After we had that conversation and everything came out, I could tell she was devastated. It's not easy to find out that the person you're about to marry has been lying to you, manipulating the people around them. I think she made the right choice in calling off the wedding. She deserves better than that, just like I do. It's strange how we both ended up being hurt by the same person, someone we both loved, someone we both trusted. In the weeks that followed, I've had a lot of time to reflect. I've come to realize that this isn't just about Jake, it's about me too. For so long, I've defined myself by being his mother. Everything I did was for him, and I've spent years putting my own needs aside to make sure he was taken care of. But now, without that role, I've had to ask myself, who am I? What do I want out of life now that it's no longer about raising him? It's a question I'm still trying to answer, but I know one thing for sure. I deserve peace. I deserve to live a life where I'm valued and respected, where I don't have to fight for my place in someone's world. I've spent too long feeling like I'm not enough, and that ends now. I've also been thinking a lot about forgiveness. It's complicated. I want to believe that one day I'll be able to forgive Jake for what he did, and for the way he treated me. But I'm not there yet. The wound is still too fresh, the betrayal too deep. Maybe in time I'll be able to let go of the anger and the hurt. But it's going to take a while. I'm not rushing it. Healing is a process, and I need to honor that. In the meantime, I've been focusing on myself for the first time in years. I've been reconnecting with friends, spending time with family members who've been supportive throughout all of this. My parents have been amazing, reminding me that I'm still a person with worth, even if Jake can't see it. My friends have been there for me too, offering love and support when I needed it most. And as for Jake, I don't know what he's doing. And honestly, I don't need to know. He's a grown man, and he'll have to figure out his life without me in it. Maybe one day he'll realize the mistake he made, but by then, it might be too late. I've made peace with the fact that I can't fix him. I can't make him the person I thought he was. He has to do that on his own. Looking back on everything that's happened, I've learned some hard lessons. I've learned that love isn't always enough, and that sometimes people will hurt you in ways you never expected. I've learned that standing up for yourself can be painful, but it's necessary. And most importantly, I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. This chapter of my life is closing, and while it's not the ending I would have wanted, it's the one I got. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with moving on, with finding out who I am outside of being Jake's mother. It's scary, but it's also freeing in a way. I still have hope that one day Jake and I will find our way back to each other. Maybe after some time has passed, after we've both had a chance to reflect and grow, we'll be able to rebuild our relationship. But if that doesn't happen, I'll be okay. I have to be. I've given all I can give. Now it's time for me to take care of myself and to live my life on my terms. And that's exactly what I plan to do.